Right, and now I will make this recording. So, as we approach the half-hour mark, and there are no attendees, which means I need to get this webinar started. And let's see attendees. Right. Courier, I'm going to make you co-host.
Okay.
For some reason, when I push on my start webinar button, it's not really doing anything.
We're still in practice session, it looks like. I'm going to hit start webinar if that's okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
All right, what about now? Do you have the option to record?
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. And
I'll just wait a second for some attendees to populate.
yeah, where are all those attendees? Oh, and Headbush called in and asked if we could make Patrick Allen an applicant for items 5 and 6.
Okay, well, it's 4:30 and we have a few members of the public here, so I was just going to go ahead and kick it off if y'all are ready.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 10th, 2021 BAR Large Virtual Meeting. My name is Jay White. I'll be acting as chair until John Robinson can join us in a little while, hopefully not too terribly long. The other board members present this afternoon are Luda Subcheck, James Metters, and then alternate Kara Wheeler is joining us tonight, filling in for Leon Scott. We don't expect to have any recusals this evening among the board members. City staff that are present are Tori Parrish and Lawrence Courtney. And the order of the meeting is, as you are probably familiar, there'll first be an introduction and overview of the project by city staff to the board for the public, and then a 10-minute time period for the applicant to make a presentation on their subject. Any and all presenters should clearly state your names for the record, and anyone that is affiliated with the project, whether you be an owner, developer, designer, consultant, etc., please speak during this portion of the proceedings rather than during the public comment portion. After the applicant presentation, we'll have a period for public comment, both written and oral. Public comment, for the most part, is structured around a 2-minute time limit per person, or as determined by the chair. And then during the public comment period, please remember that the applicant does not immediately respond to comments made during that phase. And again, as a matter of good habit, please clearly state your name and address for the record. After public comment, we'll have city staff comments and recommendation, and then that will be followed by a 5-minute period for the applicant to respond or clarify respond to or clarify either public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations. That will be followed by board discussion and a vote. Otherwise, item number 4, Earhart Street and B Street has been withdrawn by the applicant. Please remember to mute all distracting technology, including cell phones and beepers. You might have a beeper anymore. And then please remember to limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns such as students or trash, are not the purview of this board, and we can't really take action upon them. There's no reason to voice them here. Okay, Mr. Courtney. So we've been under these public participation protocols via Zoom for a while. So what I'm going to do, rather than recite all this that's on your screen, I'm just going to leave this up for a few moments, let you digest it if necessary. Of course, all of this is available via the live stream and the recordings if you need to go back and refer to them, but they're the same protocols we've been under for some time now. All right, Mr. Courtney, next slide. All right, next. Next. And next. Oh, see, that was a little faster. All right, off we go.
Okay, we'll start with agenda item number 1 is 47 and 48 Line Street. They requested the second 1-year extension of conceptual approval, which was originally granted November 28th, 2018 for 47 Line, which is parcel 2, and 48 Line, which is parcel 4. So the Canon Borough, Elliott Borough neighborhood in the Old and Historic District. We just have a few slides of the project. To refresh your memory, this is a vested right 2nd year approval extension requiring automatic board approval if submitted in a timely manner, which is good for 1 year and may be renewed 4 more times in 1-year increments. Per ordinance section 54962, this extension is to expire on November 28th, 2022. Approval of a second 1-year extension of conceptual approval to expire on November 28th, 2022 is our recommendation.
Okay, do I hear a motion from the board?
Move for approval.
Okay, and a second?
A second. Carol Wheeler.
All right, motion made and seconded. I'll call the roll. Ms. Subcheck, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler.
Yay in favor.
And I vote likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
Okay, agenda item number 2 is 52 Line Street. Request second 1-year extension of conceptual approval originally granted February 13th, 2019 for parcel 5, Canon Borough, Elliott Borough, Old and Historic District. We've got a few slides to refresh your memory. Whoa, so fast. Just trying to open something. This is a vested right 2nd year approval extension requiring automatic board approval if submitted in a timely manner, which is good for 1 year and may be renewed 4 more times in 1-year increments. For ordinance section 54962, this extension will expire February 13th, 2023. Recommendation is approval of a second 1-year extension of conceptual approval to expire on February 13th, 2023.
Hearing all that, do I hear a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion. Okay, go ahead.
I'll give the motion to Mr. Metters. Ms. Wheeler, would you
A
give a second?
second.
All right, there we go. All right, I'll call the roll. Ms. Subcheck.
Yay in favor.
Mr. Metters.
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler.
Yay in favor.
And I vote likewise. 4-0, it is approved.
Sorry, Carol.
Number 3 is a request for first 1-year extension of approval for partial demolition of rear 2-story addition. This project is at 284 King Street. It's downtown Old and Historic District. And we have Tara Romano here. I want to see if she wants to add anything. Tara, are you there? Tara?
Hey, sorry, no, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, we have just a few slides to refresh the board's memory here. If you want to add anything, just jump in. Okay. This is a vested right, first year extension requiring automatic board approval for partial demolition if submitted in a timely manner, which is good for 1 year and may be renewed 4 more times in 1 year increments. Per ordinance section 54962, this extension will expire December 11th, 2022. Recommendation is approval of a first 1 year extension of approval for partial demolition to expire on December 11th, 2022.
Okay, all right. Motion from the board.
This is Carol Wheeler. I make a motion for approval of a first 1 year extension of this project.
Okay, and a second.
I will second. Yoda.
All right, I'll call the roll. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Ms. Subject,
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler,
Yay in favor.
and I vote yay in favor. 4-0, the motion is approved.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5. 609 King Street. The request is final approval for partial demolition, stabilization, and relocation of the structure. The building is not rated. It's in the Canon Borough, Elliott Borough neighborhood, constructed between 1925 and 1935, and it sits within the old and historic district. Got some context slides for you here. An aerial, you'll see King Street, and the building sits at the terminus of Columbus Street next to Rogers Alley. You're probably very familiar with this. Looking sort of south on King Street and looking south. And then looking towards Columbus Street. And then we've got an old survey card from 1985. And with that, we are going to promote some of the applicant here. All right, let me get everybody loaded into the meeting. All right, Richard, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. So, all right, I've got Richard, Gary, Scott. Let me catch everybody up. I don't see Will Purvis. And
Will's okay to be gone. Patrick Allen, you have him?
I've got Patrick. Here he comes. What about Ron Owens?
I don't know if Ron was on the list, but you might promote him anyway, just in case he has to save me.
I don't see him yet, but I'll keep an eye on him. Everybody else is promoted. So I think we're ready when you are.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for having us. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try to be brief, but this is a unique request, and I would like to make sure we have about 15 minutes for the presentation. I don't think there'll be multiple speakers, and you feel free to cut me off if you think I'm going too deep.
15 minutes it is.
All right, thank you. I'm Richard Gow with LS3P. I'm here with Ted Risch and Andrew from LS3P, the Evening Post, Liberty, as well as our associated design team, Scott Parker with Design Works and Gary Brewer of Ramsey. We started this discussion back with the BAR back in June, and we learned very quickly about the importance of culture in this building. And then we came back in August with additional information, and the project was deferred. We promptly did the additional research suggested by Mr. Metters in his motion and then paused. We have that information in our presentation tonight. We spoke to the historic groups at that time who lobbied hard to keep the building intact. And we, as a development team, did some soul searching and decided to try to work with them on a compromise. We spoke at that time with Glenn Keys, who you all know well, and together the groups and our teams agreed that it was more important to save the memory of this little building despite what we had previously thought. We found a way to continue its use as a neighborhood retail icon because of its cultural significance. It was from the late 30s, and incorporate it into a building, which you will see in a new agenda item next if we're successful. This saving of a portion of the building allows the bigger urban context and design considerations associated with the original design to coexist with a deferential respect for the existing fabric of the city. Thus, in this agenda item, we are asking the board to allow for selective demolition of the rear, less contributing portions of the building, and allow us to stabilize and move the facade 80 feet to the south and integrate this remnant into a new structure. This agenda item will cover what we move, if allowed, and the next agenda item would cover how it gets integrated. Next. We're not going to talk about every slide. We'll focus on the issues related to the building and the fabric of the building as it relates to the partial demolition. Next. Next. It is interesting when you look at the Sanborn maps, the relative variety of the depths of buildings compared to the widths. And in particular on this map, you can see the frequency of change from 1888 to 1902 to 1944 in the subject structure. 3 different periods of mapping, 3 different depths. So our conclusion is that the width is more important than the depth when it comes to creating a streetscape such as King. Next. Next. These are close-up images of the facade. We have captured all of this detail in our scan. We have placed it into a Revit model to document the building. And in general, this particular facade, which we consider to be most of the contributing fabric of the structure, is made of brick with a stucco a skin over it. And all of those moves made on the facade are from turning bricks and pushing them in and out. Next. The other contributing portions has to do with the frequency and variety associated with these ins and outs, these vestibules, if you will, and they would be retained in our proposal in their entirety and moved south as well. The actual skirts, which are made out of plastic, the actual windows, the framing, you know, those things I think we would get into in a little bit more detail as we move forward and work with the city and the historic groups on the right period to kind of implement, because there's been a number of changes over time. But in general, the brick, the stucco, and the shape and the form, you know, we're talking completely moving as they are. Next. This is the north wall. Next. And this is the south wall. You can see we have a line drawn here that signifies about 12 feet off of the facade. This is the minimum we think needs to be saved to capture the essence of the structure and most, if not all, of the contributing features of the building. In conversations with the historic groups, we did suggest 25 feet as a starting point would work. And that would extend just past the first drop in the parapet, just to the left of that red line. And it would incorporate another one of the little hidden windows that was put in and then covered up. When we look ahead to the next agenda item, you'll see why we suggest 12 feet. And yet, because of the placement that we're asking for this building to be moved to, we have the option to save a few more feet of the south facade in an effort to use it to increase the amount of historical fabric. We are willing to do that. And we want you to know that, even though these documents say 12 feet, it's not a hard and fast number. Next, please. We consider this facade to be, the contributing fabric. Next. And we consider the back to be much less contributing fabric. Next. And the interior, depending on if you're in the front of the building or the back of the building or on the sidewalls, more or less non-contributing, but the areas up front with the brick and the block and how they framed all that, that is important. You can see the truss in here and the framing and the decking. And we have some slides showing you those particular materials and their ages. And we can talk about those particular materials then. Next. And on this slide, you can see the Rogers Alley is on the side. So this is the existing building in its current location. You can see the dash line indicating 12 feet. You see the dash line just below that on the page is a truss. The trusses occur at 10-foot intervals. And we go 2 feet past that truss because we know that would be a good opportunity to stabilize the building and show all of the decking, all the ceiling framing, and all the trusses in one microcosm if we save that first 12 feet. Next. This shows if we move it before the new building was built, about where it would go. That's Hoffler Place on the left. And just for reference, we're showing where the current footprint is today and just how close it would be to its original location. Just slide it down and move it next to create an alley, which would become, as you'll hear in the next agenda item, if we get there, an interpretive alley that would talk about the neighborhood, the district, and the importance of this building in that district. We don't move buildings for a living, okay? We generally renovate buildings and we generally do new buildings, but we've taken it very seriously, and we spoke with a company called Carolina House Movers, and they have an engineer that they work with, Eddie Porcher. And based on their review of the interior and exterior of the building, we are supremely confident that they can accomplish the storefront facade relocation as proposed. A design build engineer will prepare the design for the temporary bracing, the relocation methods, and the structural stabilization of the existing building. This same engineer will design the foundation for the relocated facade. A lot of thought has gone into this relocation. It's a major undertaking, and I'd like to share with you just a few steps that we think need to be taken as talked through with this Carolina House Mover. And just for reference, Carolina House Mover has moved lighthouses intact, beautifully, plumb, and put them in new spots. So they are the real deal. So our work plan would include determining the depth of the footings around the portion of the building to be saved and tying them to the related structural elements. We would prepare engineering documents for the shoring and bracing for the storefront and all those components. And then we would install the permanent stabilization for storefront, installing shotcrete on the existing walls, bracing the roof to the front wall, and so on. We would then selectively demo the existing building near that line of demarcation and around the perimeter to prepare for the steel shoring and lifting installation, because they're going to take this thing, stabilize it, and then lift it and roll it. At that point, once it's stabilized, they will demo the rear of the building. They will go down to the new location, install the sheet piling. They will install the deep foundations, the pile caps, grade beams. And then once those are ready to receive the building would be moved to the proposed location and set on the foundation. At that point, only the shoring would be removed to the extent that the building could withstand any new construction around it. And then once that was determined, it was safe, we would install the permanent structural stabilization, the new shotcrete, anything that needed to be done to bring it up to code and to make this a permanent move. And then we would proceed with any underground parking or new building around the building. So that's kind of the process. And I appreciate you indulging us because that's just a really important part. Next slide, please. Just a couple more. This is a slide of the front. All of these details, the plan details, the sections are all available to us at this time. Next. And this is a slide that Mr. Metter's comments had spurred to basically color code and show what is new and original and what has been replaced. The red wall in the back is a new CMU wall. The yellow walls on the sides are that cinder block, bumpy or rougher texture. You can see the openings on the left that were installed. Windows were opened and installed and then removed and filled in. The green wall in the middle is not structural. It was a demising wall originally. The blue and red are more or less the storefront locations. The red was changed from the original, and the blue is the original form. Next. And my colleague, Mr. Risch, has prepared another slide here showing in more detail, indicating that the decking appears to be all non-original. The framing is a standard pre-1963 2x common framing, as is the ceiling framing. The trusses are 2x material as well, appear to be original. I will say that they are original, but the detailing isn't very unique in any way. It's intact. You can see the line of demarcation that we're proposing here that is just past that first truss. Next. And here is a section of what we would be saving and the configurations, and we have a lot of details, and we'll produce all the details. Would you please go to the last slide in the packet, and that would be, I'll just make some closing remarks. We appreciate the input of the historical groups and the city in getting to this point, and we hope that the board sees this as a win-win for the neighborhood, the historical groups, and the development team. And to any skeptics in the crowd who might not want to set a precedent, we could say this. There have been entire buildings moved in the city previously, and including a church building from Pitt to Calhoun Street. A building was moved during the renovations of the county courthouse and sits proudly on Broad Street today. And multiple buildings we were involved with over on the Line Street project. Moving buildings is not for any project. It's for projects that have greater good and urban implications. And here are a few reasons that we think that this is a good candidate. It's contributing fabric, although relatively small, is very important in a cultural way, but where it's located is not necessarily that important. And it's pretty easy to achieve moving something of that size down. So we think that that's a criteria. Its current location at the terminus of Columbus is really a pivotal location in the city where the street in the future can terminate in a quasi-public garden space and enhance, through its doing, a much larger area than its own site. So that this particular intersection has district-wide implications. Next, this building, when located, will be moved onto an alley where the interpretation of history can occur and increase the importance of the building because a more comprehensive story of the district and the cultural importance of the building can be told there. Next, the future as a use as neighborhood retail within a new structure will continue. This building that is old neighborhood retail is going to move over here, we're proposing, and become new neighborhood retail. We really like that authentic kind of continuation of the cycle. And last, there is consensus in the city groups whose charge it is to do the right thing for the city. And we all worked in concert to compromise for the greater good. And those we feel are good enough reasons for you to vote favorably for this application. Thank you. We'll entertain any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board or staff? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment.
Okay,
Any live speakers for public comment
Yes.
first?
we'll start with Erin Minigan. I just promoted her. Give her a second to come on.
Thank you. Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant's consistent communication on this project over the past several months. We have worked diligently to advocate for the preservation of this historic building and its incorporation into the overall redevelopment plan. We have seen this successfully done on other projects such as 511 Meeting Street and feel confident it could be done on this site as well. We were very encouraged to see the applicant take into consideration the cultural and architectural significance of this building and change course to study options to salvage a portion of the historic building. Early conversations indicated a more significant portion would be saved, so the form of the building would read sufficiently in the new design. To this end, we are disappointed to see the amount proposed to be preserved in the current submission is only 12 feet in depth, which in our opinion is essentially facadism and not meaningful preservation of the building. We are not opposed to the idea of relocating the building within its context, but relocating it in conjunction with demolishing such a significant amount of the building diminishes too much of its integrity. Therefore, we urge the board to defer this request to allow the applicant to study retaining more of the historic building's form. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minigan. Next, we'll have Justin Schwebler of HCF.
Yes, this is Justin Schwebler of Historic Charleston Foundation. We would first like to thank the design team for taking the time and effort to exhaustively explore different options for the future of this building. While we would prefer to see the historic storefront preserved whole and reutilized as part of the programming for the Liberty project, we understand the design and programming challenges related to the project overall. We typically do not support facadism or relocation as a preferred means of preserving a historic structure, but the Liberty team have come up with a creative and ambitious program to help preserve this historic storefront and incorporate it into the new interpretive alley that will help tell the story of Little Jerusalem neighborhood and its residents. We recommend approval of the partial demolition of 609 King Street and relocation of the historic storefront. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schwebler. And then our last public speaker is Marion Hawkins.
Thank you, Tori. Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, my name is Marion Hawkins, president of the Canon Borough Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association. The applicant presented the request for demolition at our September meeting. And after reviewing the presentation and we voted and unanimously approved a demolition. We're very perplexed after 2 deferrals why the demolition was not granted. This building really has no significance, and really we find that for the board not to support a full demolition almost lowers the standard of preservation. I mean, so many efforts through many of our residents, business owners, developers have spent so much money in preservation and renovation and restoration. And this really, despite the narratives that's been presented, has no significance to us in the neighborhood. And we're really concerned now that this will be kind of an anomaly and a token use, just like 511 Meeting Street was whenever that development was, that warehouse was saved and then incorporated into a building there. So again, we would challenge the board to show leadership and direction by, we request granting a full demolition and at minimum a partial demolition. So thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. And then for the record, the board was emailed 3 public written comments yesterday.
Yeah, and I have those, and I'll go ahead and read those into the record if y'all are ready. The first is from Jarrett Hodson. 67 Line Street. I understand and support the partial demolition and development plan at 609 King. I appreciate how the updated plan incorporates the existing structure into the new. It makes the existing space functional while adding usable space to the new building. The next is Miller Harper at 299 East Bay. Dear members of the Board of Architectural Review, my name is Miller Harper. I'm the managing partner of East West Partners here in Charleston at 299 East Bay. We've been involved in new developments and renovations of existing properties on the Charleston Peninsula. I'm trying to drill down to the statement of support or rejection here. I understand the development and ownership team of 609 King are proposing to partially demolish the existing cinder block building. Proposed plan will retain a piece of the original fabric of King, while also allowing for a new, much needed project to move forward. Believe this is a great solution and offer my support to the project. And then the third is Mitch Norville at 677 King. Previously, I wrote in support of this development because I feel it is very important to the completion of the commercial fabric of Upper King, and I still feel that way. They've developed a plan to partially demolish 609 King and incorporate the remaining piece of the building into the new development. This modification allows them to retain a portion of the original fabric while also allowing much needed project to move forward. This is a great example of responsible development where the owner and development team have listened to various stakeholders and worked with them and the city to produce a project that meets the various needs. Okay, so those are those three written comments.
Thank you, Mr. White. I don't have any other public comment or speakers.
Okay, well, let's move on, shall we?
We shall.
That's you, right?
Yeah, let's just wait. She learns to drive it. Okay. Staff comments. Number one, regarding the proposed relocation and any potential contingency plan needed, the applicant has indicated that HAB's quality documentation, measured drawings and photographs has been completed in order to reconstruct the facade if necessary. Number two, approval for partial demolition is to be contingent on the approval of a new building for this location. Our recommendation, the building will remain in the same relationship with King Street as it currently has, very near to its present location. Applicant is to provide documentation to staff with further collection of information for reconstruction if necessary, using the Secretary of Interior standards for reconstruction. Approval for partial demolition, stabilization, and relocation with final review by staff is recommended with these conditions, as well as being contingent on the final board approval for the new building for this location.
Okay, having heard that, is there any applicant clarification or response?
There's no, other than to Ms. Minigan's point, you know, we are interested in discussing how far back we need to go in order to be relevant. It's not just a question of how much of the building is saved, but how much of the building is visible to the public. And that may become a little bit more clear in the second agenda item.
Okay. All right, board discussion.
Jay, let's see, wait a minute. Yeah, I'll start off here. I want to tell Richard, Richard, excuse me, I want to tell you how grateful I am for your commitment to providing us with the research information. And that was a valuable tool for me, and thank you for doing that. Is Mr. Underwood on the call?
I don't think so. Is he a member of our team?
Well, he's the structural engineer.
I don't see him listed in Zoom.
No.
Scares me a little bit. You didn't know he was a member of your team, but he is the guy that wrote the report. At least that's the name on the report. Brett Underwood.
Brett. I know him as Brett. Thank you.
So in the application, it's indicated that you supply HAB's quality drawings with measured drawings and photographs, and they've been completed in order to reconstruct the facade if necessary. So, you know, I've looked at this building now several times, and It's a difficult project to move, and I understand your representation of the professionalism of the Carolina house movers, but this will be a challenging building to move intact, and I recognize that. However, I appreciate the commitment that you made to the documentation and incorporating it into the new structure, and I plan to support this.
Any other board discussion?
This is Carol Wheeler. I remember, I think it's a couple of years ago when requests were filed for the adjacent buildings along King Street, I think. And I remember that this building wasn't part of that demolition request back then, because I think it was deemed worth keeping. So I'm glad to see that that's still the case. I think keeping just 12 foot does not make this building read as a building anymore. Just like I agree with the Preservation Society's view on that, and you might do yourself a disservice with trying to keep just 12 feet and trying to integrate that into the new building. That's the next agenda item, because in order to make it look as part of the development, I think it needs to be more substantial, so that it doesn't look like a canopy or a little stoop to a 5-story building behind there. And generally, relocation of buildings, I also think it's not, it's nice to keep a building, but it's not authentic to move it to a location that doesn't make it sit proud, really, like it was the case maybe with other buildings in the city. But I understand in this situation, the building is not quite centered on the opposite street. So I think previously the architects had tried to focus on the third bay that is centered on the perpendicular street, and made that a little different. But I think in this particular case, relocating the structure would be fine in my opinion. But just keeping 12 feet, I think is not the right way to go.
This is Lyuda Sobchuk. So I'm again was in agreement with staff comments and recommendations, but I also would think that 12 feet is diminishing the value of this move altogether if we are trying to preserve not just facade but the building and its integrity, if it's even partial. So I would think that it would be good to study with the whatever is next, it's coming new, and see if it can be integrated better than just facade of the building. And also the moving the structure a few feet on a street is it should not be detrimental, again, because what is focus of the access of the Columbus Street, it's not really, like Tara said, not in the center of the building, but probably incidentally on a bay or even off bay, third bay of this building. So I would in support of the partial demolition, preserving and moving the front of this building to the location what is proposed.
Okay, thank you. I would add to that support for relocation of the building. Relocating historic structures is generally frowned upon in preservation practice, but in this case, I don't think it really diminishes the interpretation of the building to move it 30-odd feet to the south. But what will diminish the interpretation of the building, as my fellow board members have noted, is sawing it off right behind the entry vestibule. And I think that the at least double the amount of the depth of the building ought to be preserved and relocated. I think conceptually, this is probably a worthwhile strategy for dealing with this building. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable with the notion that we're just sort of, slicing this thing apart and scooting it out of the way for something that is in the present moment deemed to be better and grander. That's not the way great cities are built, frankly. A lot of people have a misconception about that. Certainly not the way that Charleston became great, to be honest with you, because the notable examples of buildings that have been relocated are relatively rare. My perspective on this is that we can give some indication of the appropriateness of the approach, but until we know precisely how much of the building is going to be retained, we really can't give this thing approval, in my view. But that is up for my fellow board members to determine in whatever motion y'all might make.
So Jay, let me,
I think, yeah, very
go ahead,
quickly.
Luna. Go ahead, Luna.
So on the alley side, that photograph which was showing, I think more or less natural cutoff should be after the first step of the roof parapet, which is over the 25 feet. And so that rather than slicing in half. So yes, I think the most important will be how this preserved, cut off, relocated structure will be complemented by the new proposed project. That's kind of it what I'm saying. So I'm still thinking that we can. I would support the relocation and partial demolition, but it needs to be much more meaningful than it is right now.
Mr. Chairman,
James, go ahead.
I think that if I'm understanding everyone correctly, there is going to be support for relocating the structure, but there needs to be a plan resubmitting showing an increased depth of the slice area that is to be relocated. Is that what you're hearing also?
That is what I'm hearing.
Well, so Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion for a.
I'm sorry, James, I'm sorry. May I
Yes,
ask a question? Richard, could you preserve that whole wall as it on this photograph and incorporate?
If you would allow, go backwards and look at the plan.
Well, I don't know. That's if it's any value here. I'm just asking, and if my colleagues will think that it is a value, I don't know. But
I think 25 feet definitely past that first step is definitely possible. The wall does angle in a great deal.
Okay.
But the first 25 feet would be okay.
You were just talking about some kind of history will be shown on that alley with, so I didn't know how you're going to do that, but anyway, that's sort of sold here. I mean, that wall could be, if you're showing mirror or whatever, I don't know. I'm done, sorry.
Okay. Any further comment or motion?
James, are you going to do it? I cut you off, sorry.
No problem. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask a question before I make my motion, and that would be to maybe if you wanted to ask Richard if he wanted to just simply withdraw in order to come back and tell us about a different depth that he could slice the building, or would he prefer a deferral with a specific request?
Is that a question?
Sounds like it.
So I've never withdrawn so many applications in my life working with this little guy. Okay. So we're not above withdrawing, but I think if this board told the applicant and the owner, we would support you if you saved 2 trusses at least, we would be fine with that. I know this isn't supposed to be a negotiation, but frankly, that's what we're talking about is the truss lines, and they're every 10 feet. And
so Richard, you're correct. It's not a negotiation, and I didn't mean to open it up for that. My question was simply about the withdrawal or deferral. So I will make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we defer the application, and that request is specific to the new depth that the developer would propose, that they slice the building. I am in support of the movement of the building, but I'd like to have it represented at a depth that is deeper than what is shown now. Maybe all of that can be restated as just restudy the depth to the slice.
Okay. The way I might suggest that be written is it's a motion for deferral, requiring that the applicant restudy the resulting building depth in accordance with board and staff comments.
Sounds like exactly what I said.
Okay. All right. So just to restate that again, this is a motion for deferral with requirement to study the resulting new building depth in accordance with board and staff comments.
Correct.
All right, so Mr. Metters has made that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. I'll call the roll. Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
I in favor.
Okay, Ms. Sobchak.
I in favor.
Mr. Metters.
I in favor.
And I vote likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
thank you.
All right, procedural question. Does that mean that agenda item number 6 is heard or not heard, Mr. Chair?
I think that this may have broad implications on the height, scale, and mass of agenda item number 6. So I don't think we can hear it.
All right.
Item 7's in there somewhere.
Coming. I had visual staff comments for you this time. Okay. Item number 7. All right, here we go. 649 King Street. This request is for conceptual approval for a 15-unit apartment building with ground floor retail. It's Courier Square Phase 2, Building 2, Canon Borough, Elliott Borough neighborhood, Heights District 6, Old and Historic District. And the context is something you're very familiar with because it's north of the block that we just discussed. But I believe we are jumping right into the applicant's presentation. So we should have Mr. Gow, Brewer, and let me see what else we need. Okay. I should have everybody in the meeting on the applicant team. So we're ready when you are.
Rich, are you going to start?
Yes, I'm Richard Gow with Ellis Street B here with Gray Star Evening Post, Rams Design Works and Seaman Whiteside to talk about the changes to buildings 2, 3, and 4. This is building 2, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Brewer.
This is Gary Brewer, partner at Robert Stern Architects. We're glad to be back again. As it has been noted before, we're very dedicated to doing the best building with our team possible for these 3 separate sites. And we are passionate at times about our opinions, but we value working closely not only with the board, but with Historic Charleston, the Preservation Society, the neighborhood groups to work together as we have on the last 7 projects that we have brought before this board to build the best building possible that we can for these sites. Next, please. So the building site, as you know, is on the corner of Line and King Street, 95 by 108 feet. Next, please. And here you can see the site plan. Scott, were you going to talk about the site?
Yes, so thank you very much. This is Scott Parker with Design Works. So real quick, we're looking at building 2. I just wanted to remind everybody about the overall site and the importance of the open space, not only for building 2, but building 3 and 4 that you'll see later on tonight. And approximately 25% of the overall site is dedicated to open space. With regard to building 2, we have a new alley to the south of the building that it provides access to the building and provides access from the parking in building 1 across the alley to the south. Again, the building benefits from having all of the parking located in the building to the south. The new alley also will provide further access into the site where the vehicular court is, that provides service access for not only this building, but the other buildings within the block. Included in the project will be new streetscape all the way around King Street, Line Street, and St. Philip Streets. So that's an overview, and I'll turn it back to Gary.
Thanks, Scott. Next, please. So here you can see the floor plans. Based on the board's comments, we have worked to address those comments, which have included not only changes to the exterior that we will be showing, but also reconfiguring some components of the interior to work with the new proposed exterior. Next, please. So the summary of the board and staff comments, I guess this is in English. And the basic 2 points were the facade facing King Street, everybody thought was the most successful facade. And there was concern associated with treating this as a two-building expression in our attempt to address the neighborhood's materials of clapboard. So we have addressed those in the new proposed design. Next, please. So this is the before and after of the facade facing King Street. Next, please. With the plan showing that facing towards King and Line Street, there would be retail at the base. Next, please. Here you can see it at a larger scale, and we're looking closely at brick buildings in Charleston, primarily on King Street for the inspiration of this design. Next, please. Next, please. Getting into a larger scale elevation, showing potential ideas of materials and detailing. Next, please. And then moving around to the north facade. Next, please. And the proposed design, I'm sorry, can you go back one? The earlier design showed two expressions with a brick and a clapboard building with a party wall in an attempt to relate to the materials of the adjacent houses. The proposed design on all sides of the building now are showing an all brick building. Next, please. Which you can see here. Next, please. Here you can see before and proposed on the bottom. Next, please. And here you can see it with the plan, retail facing at the ground level on Line Street and King Street. Next, please. So we have kept the corner tower element that we will talk about shortly, but in changing this to an all brick facade, we thought it was important to break down the scale of it with a center vertical mass that makes the length appear to be less long and relates perhaps better to the scale of the residential neighborhood. And then on either side, we have a built-in porch and a Juliet balcony that's brought down to the ground with the 3 bays of retail. Next, please. Moving to the west elevation, the earlier design had clapboard with 3 porches. The proposed design is now all brick. Next, please. It will face the motor court and a wider sidewalk on this side. Next, please. And here you can see it at a larger scale. So again, with the facade that is facing towards King Street having a more mercantile expression, and in the spirit of simplification, the 3 other sides have a very similar expression with a center mass with 2 side wings. In this case, to provide the balconies and the shade and shadow associated with it and the liveliness of having a balcony facing the motor court, we have balconies flanking either side. And then at the base of the building, the new design shows the space off of the retail, all underneath a porch-like structure with 2 retail storefronts, and the idea being that there might be outdoor dining there. Next, please. And then here you can see it at a larger scale, starting to get into the materials of the brick and what could potentially be metal balconies to be studied in the future phases in preliminary. Next, please. And then finally moving to the south elevation, which is the elevation that faces towards the new alley Scott just spoke about, moving from a 2-expression building to a singular expression building. Next, please. And here you can see it with the alley and the adjacent building number 1. Next, please. And again, similar to the north and the west and the south, we have a center mass that projects out with side wings. Here we have the balconies on the right and the left. And since this becomes an entry to the building, we have a canopy at the center, at the front door there, and then awnings to the right and left. Next, please. So as noted earlier, the view down Line Street with this site provides an opportunity to terminate the view. And you can see where the red circle is. Next, please. Again, looking towards examples in Charleston of buildings that terminate corner views. Next, please. And then a perspective view. Next, please. The existing site. Next, please. And here you can see in the rendering the Line Street facade being changed all to brick. I know that there were comments and concerns about the height of the tower and even the gable facing towards King Street. Those types of comments are certainly comments that we would address typically in a preliminary review. We think that both are important. For the gable, it's especially important considering that this is a corner site and it will be adjacent to a taller building. So we think that that gable is important to hold the scale of a 4-story building. And of course, the tower at the corner to terminate the view. Next, please. And here you can see it at a larger scale with the Line Street facade being changed to all brick. Next, please. And then a view to the alley. Keep in mind, this is buildable space, but as part of this design, we are proposing a new pedestrian alley. Next, please. The existing view towards King and the Post and Courier building. Next, please. And then evening view looking towards King Street with the building we're discussing on the left, and then the building, what we call building number 1 on the right. Next. Next. Rich, you want to talk about this slide?
Yes, generally speaking, it's a 6-story zone, and we unilaterally gave up 2 floors to be better in scale with the neighbors across Line Street and adjacent on Line. Thanks, Gary.
Next. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Tori, may I say a few words?
Yes.
You hear me? Sorry, I know y'all are sick of hearing from me lately. I was invited in early, but just a couple words on behalf of the developer and partner, Ben Liebechild with Greystar, speaking on behalf of Greystar as well as our partner Evening Post. I would ask that this just quick intro, I won't speak again on 3 and 4 to hopefully move quickly, so I'll kind of just speak to all 3, but I just wanted to quickly note our approach here on this project remains the same. We're here to be good neighbors, good stewards for this neighborhood. We've had a a pattern, I think, of nearly a year now of patience, involvement, outreach, especially on the design piece as well. Obviously a tough night at BAR last time we were here for these 3 buildings, but I do want y'all to know that the most important thing is we listened, we reacted. We went through all of the comments from the BAR, of course, as well as those from Preservation Society, Historic Charleston City staff. We organized them, we siphoned them, reviewed each one. We did our absolute best to find common ground. I think we all know that not everyone agrees in this city, but I think there was some common ground that we really did our absolute best to address. We've had multiple meetings with all those groups after the BAR. We even put options in front of some others to gain opinions and further get feedback. And through all that process, this building probably maybe changed the least of the 3, but you'll see some substantial changes on the others. And we believe, the design team believes, this has resulted in a much improved design, not only for this building, but for 3 and 4. So we just appreciate us being here. Our commitment to open space, extensive outreach, workforce housing, multiple concessions with Canon Borough, that remains. And we hope that you'll agree with us tonight and give us conceptual approval for these 3 buildings. So thank y'all for the opportunity.
Okay, any questions from board or staff of the applicant?
This is Carol Wheeler. I have 2 questions. First question is related to the tower element, and I was just curious if that's accessible, since it's pretty large height, but I didn't see any fenestration or doors, or is that basically just an attic space, or is that accessible?
Rich, do you want to talk about the plan?
Well, the tower is there right now in height, scale, and mass to create a terminus. And on other projects, as we moved along, we would contemplate opening it to the exterior or having it be some other feature. And I'm not sure we have exactly determined that at this point, but it's an important thing. A lot of people talk about it, and I appreciate you bringing it to our attention, because it's an important decision that has to be made.
Thank you. And then the second question was the previous staff comments from the September 22nd meeting. They were, I think, staff comments 1 through 4 requested specific studies of the window sizes and the storefront alignment and other items. Do you want to talk about that, since I don't see any changes or any reactions to those 4 comments? Do you have any input on that?
Yeah, this is Gary. So, and I can't point, but we looked at the King Street facade, and where the gable is at the pediment at the top, you can see the brick piers on the right and left come all the way down to the ground. And you can see at the outside corners, those brick piers come all the way down to the ground. And so the issue associated with the storefront in the center, we went back and looked at many of the King Street storefronts that often have wider storefronts than the fenestration above.
So impressive.
And so that was our conclusion, that it was within the patterns of what you see on King Street. As far as the fenestration, that for us is typically something that we dig in further during the preliminary review. But as the first part of the design, we wanted to have a simple repetitive fenestration that was typical of the storefronts that you see on, or the buildings that you see on King Street. So that was the beginning idea for this. And then the tower, we thought that the study of the tower and how high it would be and its exact shape could potentially be studied further once we got conceptual approval, as we have studied the towers in the past on other projects that we've done during the preliminary. So it doesn't represent perhaps a final design, but it represents the beginning design gesture to be further developed in future development of this project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, you want to talk about the rustication as well on the upper floors, or is that the same answer?
It's the same. Yeah. I mean, once we would get approval and we would come back with materials and exact detailing and profiles. For us, that is typically, in the past, we've gotten approval into the next phase with those types of comments to be studied. They weren't in the past typically reasons for deferral. They were reasons for approval with comments in the next preliminary phase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from board or staff? All right. Hearing none, let's go on to public comment.
Okay, for this one, we're going to have Aaron Minigan, Marion Hawkins, and Justin Schwebler. Start with Aaron. She's at the top of the list here.
Thank you. Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out and walking us through the proposal. To reiterate from our previous comments on this proposal, we agree there needs to be a strong corner building at this location, and brick is the right material choice. We appreciate the applicant restudying the entire building expressed in brick per the board's previous direction, which we feel is a major improvement. The architectural language through the main body of the building on the King Street elevation is positive and includes many good traditional details. However, we feel several areas need refinement. First, the gable parapet seems superfluous as it does not relate to anything happening on the facade below, and we feel it should be eliminated. Second, the octagonal roof element should be restudied. While the corner is an opportunity for a defining element, the top of the building appears disjointed and devoid of detail, undermining the effort toward a strong corner treatment. And finally, the expression of the Line Street elevation also needs restudy. We do not feel the recessed and shallow balconies are an appropriate treatment for the urban context, and especially for a building with such a traditional design direction. We feel this elevation should be restudied to be more in keeping with the character of the King Street facade and precedent examples shown on page 42 to present a more simple, rational fenestration pattern. Based on the degree of restudy needed, particularly to the Line Street elevation, we do feel the board should defer the application to allow for further refinement before the project progresses to the next phase of review. Thank you.
And Mr. Schwebler next.
This is Justin Schwebler with Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd first like to thank the applicant for taking the time to meet with us multiple times since the last BAR meeting about this project. We believe that they've come up with a highly successful design. The single expression facade along Line Street is a notable improvement, and the west elevation porches and first floor gallery will create an attractive mixed-use space along the motor court. We would like to thank the applicant for their thoughtful response to the board and staff comments regarding the design, and we recommend approval of this application as submitted. Thank you.
And then we'll have Mr. Hawkins.
Mr. Chairman, Marion Hawkins, President of Canon, Borough, Elliott Neighborhood Association. We'd like to applaud the applicant for the improvement of the design by creating a single expression. It's a wonderful building. We think the tower component could be taller and more pronounced. The balustrades could be removed and make the brick fully be expressed, to express the corner. We do like the continued refinement of the sides and the details. We support the concept and encourage the board to approve.
And let's see. I think the only written correspondence we had was from Mr. Hawkins, so that has been taken care of. Any further public comment that you're aware of?
That's all the public comment for this one.
Okay. Well, what is staff's disposition?
Okay. Staff's disposition. These are some staff comments. The use of a single expression is an improvement. 2, while the rusticated base is welcome, staff is still concerned about by the less common continuance of this treatment on the middle portion of the building and found that it should be limited to the ground floor. 3, the pediment to the east and the vertical portions of the building below it are unrelated to the massing and functions below. Vertical portions of the building at the east, north, and in one place on the south abruptly stop at the base level and are unresolved. 4, like in the case of Courier Square, the corner spire cap is low and may only be seen from a distance. This could potentially be resolved by simply allowing the tower element to be taller without the visual break caused by the balustrade. And 5, the balustraded parapet at the top may be a bit fussy and was simpler on the previous version. A recommendation is deferral with board and staff comments.
Okay, do we have an applicant clarification or response?
This is Gary. As I noted earlier, all of these types of comments are typically, in our experience in other projects, things that we study in the preliminary phase, and in our experience haven't been the reason for deferral. So we're open to what the board has to think about that. All of these issues are issues that we would typically study in the next phase and intend to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, board discussion.
This is Kara Wheeler. I can start, and I haven't been at the last presentation, but I looked at the comments and the previous presentations. And I think this building made a great improvement. The simplification and the single expression is successful in my eyes. And I'll just refer to some of the staff comments. I generally agree with staff comments. I think the tower element, instead of making it taller, if the tower would align with the exterior facade and you really make it a corner element, instead of just setting back the top portion, it would already become a stronger corner element, and it would relate more to the precedents you have shown in your presentation. One other thing I noticed is that the facade on Line Street is not parallel to Line Street, whereas the majority of the buildings along Line Street, the facades are all parallel to the street. So I think that should be studied, since this is part of the conceptual approval and massing. And lastly, when staff talks about the pediment or the gable on King Street, I do think that's competing with the tower element. I don't think that's necessary, or if it's necessary, it should relate to some kind of recesses in the facade. And lastly, I would just be concerned about giving conceptual approval without having some of these items addressed, because we very often see that once a conceptual approval is given, that in the subsequent approvals or in the subsequent presentations, there are hardly any changes made. Materials are explored, of course, and the details are shown, but massing changes in the facade often don't occur. So I'm in agreement with staff comments.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I would like to go. So again, I am in agreement with all staff comments, and just in support of the fact that tower doesn't read as a tower, because the top of that corner is disconnected from the rest of the, so to say, tower. Balustrade is particularly unnecessary. So it needs to be studied, which also refers to the scale and mass of this building. The pediment on King Street facade is also disconnected from the facade below. So, and there is a example photos on the presentation, which one of them is really showing how the pediment and continuation of the expression of that pediment all the way down to the ground is works well. And in same talking about that, actually Line Street facade is a little bit more successful about that, because there's no pediment, but still that central element with a balustrade above, and it shows, it expresses itself much better and coherent with the rest of the building. But I guess there's enough points here and bringing in the elements and details and bringing that all and bypassing all that and thinking that in preliminary we will see all that resolved is maybe it's needed to be relooked, and I would support the staff with recommendation of the deferral.
Okay.
Mr.
Anyone
Chairman,
else? Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat the things that my fellow board members have already said, but for the most part, I agree with them. I would like to reference, as Kara brought up, the 9/22/21 staff comments, as well as the current staff comments, and specifically ask for conversations from the applicant or study from the applicant on the gable end on King Street and the corner tower. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board discussion or a motion?
And this is Carol Wheeler. If there are no other comments, I would make a motion for deferral with board and staff comments.
All right, we have a motion made by Ms. Wheeler for deferral with board and staff comments. Do we have a second?
I will
I'll
second it.
Okay, Luna second. That's fine.
Everybody seconded. Okay, all right. I'll grant that one to you, Ms. Subject. All right, I'll call the roll. All right, actually, Mr. Robinson, have you been here for this entire application, or did you just pop in?
I have not. I notified Tori that I would be available on the next agenda item. As much as I would care to join in your vote, I will abstain.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right, Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
All right, Ms. Wheeler.
Yay in favor.
Ms. Subject.
Yay in favor.
All right, and I vote likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you for serving as chair, Mr. White.
I was about to say I can continue doing it because, I mean, you know, maybe John would like an opportunity to.
Well, first, Mr. White, I want to thank you for leading us ably, as I was able to watch most of this presentation. And I was checking in on audio, handling a meeting that was unavoidable, and I did think I was going to be finished on that earlier, and I apologize that I was not. So you have my thanks and my apologies, but thank you for leading us along as well as you did. And it's my understanding we're at agenda item number 8, 244 St. Philip Street.
That's correct. 244 St. Philip is the request for conceptual approval for a 50-unit apartment building, Courier Square Phase 2, Building 3, Borough, Elliott Borough neighborhood, height district 2.5 to 3, old and historic district. We have some context slides for you this time. That is not correct, though.
Take your time.
Looks like we had
That's from looks like that's from last week.
slides. So we'll just skip.
Last meeting.
All right, moving on to the applicant's presentation.
Who do we have for the applicant this evening?
All right, we are gonna have Mr. Gal, Brewer, Liebertrout, Novotny, and Tao. And they should all be in the meeting.
The applicant has the floor. Just let us know who would like to speak first.
Okay, so I'll just say hello and thank you for having us back. Mr. Liebertrout gave the overarching comments in the last agenda item that would apply to the approach that we have taken as a team. So I'm going to yield to Gary Brewer and Scott Parker.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich. This is Gary Brewer, Robert Stern Architects. Next, please. Next. The site, as you know, corner of Line and St. Philip Street. Next. In the residential neighborhood of Sina. Next. In going back and looking at the revision of the design, we are still studying the sizes of this footprint and the other buildings' footprints in relationship to the residential character of the buildings on St. Philip Street and their footprint sizes. Next, please. This site is 84 by 130 feet, and you can see the adjacent single houses that are across the street and adjacent to it. Next, please. The plan of the building is with units that are typically studio units. And so you'll see on the exterior, the expression of the windows are meant to reflect the plan of the building. You will see in the north and the west and the east side significant changes in the plan that relate to the new proposed design. Next, please. Each of the plans. Next, please. The staff comments were along the lines of simplification and studying the townhouse expression, which resulted in a multiple expression as a means to fit within the neighborhood, to the possibility of studying as a single expression. Next, please. So starting on St. Philip Street, you can see the earlier design at the top and the adjacent houses and the proposed design on the bottom, which moves from a multiple townhouse type expression to a singular apartment building expression. Next, please. Here you can see it with its plan. Next, please. And the earlier design at the top with the proposed design on the bottom. Next, please. So the plan has been changed along the facade and along the interior to work with the new single expression. You can see that the main entry of the building in the floor plan has been moved to be on center between the two masses on the right and left of it. Next, please. Here you can see it at a slightly larger scale. These masses have been designed to be 3 bays wide so that it is 2 scalar elements that are reacting to the sizes of the residential neighborhood. Each of them has an entry into the unit, which we think enlivens the street facade. And then with the central entry in the middle, you can see that the window types have been simplified, with the predominant window being a Serlian type of window without the arched window, which provides an adequate window width that you can see in the plan below, and which has been alternated with single windows and arched windows with shutters to give interest to the syncopation of the windows. At the top, we are using a simplified gable pediment that you often see in buildings in Charleston. Next, please. And here you can see at a larger scale, clapboard, traditional double hung windows, arches that are sized to the openings with hinges and shutter dogs, and then traditional columns and entablatures and cornices. Next, please. And then moving around to the north, facade facing Line Street on the top, the earlier design and the current proposed design. Next, please. which is changed to a single expression, and again has two masses that are working to relate to the footprints of the adjacent houses. Next, please. Here you can see it at a larger scale with the plan and the simplification because of the side units here. We have single double hung windows, and we have a building entry that is right on the center with the two hipped roofs and the parapet that connects them as one. Next, please. Moving around to the motor court, the east elevation, the earlier townhouse type multiple expression look being modified to a single expression. Next, please. And here you can see it with facing the motor court. Next, please. And then at a larger scale, taking the look of the building facing St. Philip Street and trying to, in the spirit of simplification, translating it over to the east elevation facing the motor court, with the predominant window type being the wider window with the mullions and the windows on either side, and then a continuous porch at the center with a gable over where the entry is, and then another porch facing to the stair entry, and again carrying the language of the shutters at the piano nobile, which are the full size of the opening and half the width. Next, please. And then finally, the south elevation before and after. Next, please. And continuing on the character of the other three facades. Next, please. And then at a larger scale, the mass to the west, since the adjacent house has a motor court, we have stepped the mass to represent that scale that relates to the rest of the houses within the neighborhood. Next, please. And then finally, the perspective view. Next, please. So the existing south looking north. Next, please. And then the new proposed design with the St. Philip Street elevation with a single expression and two pavilions with gables that are meant to respond to the height, scale, and mass and the character of the adjacent houses. And I think that's it. Or next, please. Is that the last slide? Yeah, so if you could go back to that. So that's the end of the presentation on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Written public comment in general, Tori.
We have four public speakers.
Okay.
We will start with Pedro Riba. Let me elevate him to panelist. All right, Pedro. Pedro. Pedro.
Shows is muted.
Yeah.
For me.
Me too.
Steve, can unmute
Okay.
yourself. You have the floor.
Yep, hear me now?
Yes.
The only comment or question is that it seems onto the motor court. The building exits onto the motor without a wall. The first wall that you will come to is the property that I and Tom own on 71 Line Street. That wasn't addressed in this presentation. I realize it's not part of the fate of number 3. But I have no other comments other than a query on how the building exits onto the motor court and the wall, if they're able to comment on this point.
Questions as opposed to comments are unusual, but if staff is able to comment on that, or Tori, to her understanding, I'll
I believe that
believe that is your main, or if Tori would prefer that the applicant address it, that's fine.
Yeah, so I would be comfortable with the applicant addressing that. The property that the speaker is referring to is on Line Street, and so this is sort of in between buildings 2 and 3. It is
Okay.
behind buildings 3 if Richard or any of the applicant team would like to respond. Sorry.
I would like Mr. Parker to answer that question.
Okay.
Yes, so there will be a new garden wall created along the edge of Mr. Rivas' property. If you look at the plan view, the wall will separate your property from the motor court and the one-way drive that comes into the motor court. And then there will be some landscape treatment along that edge. And I mean, if you want to go back a couple of drawings to a site plan, there you go. So yeah, I think he's addressing, those 2 properties right there. And you can see the dark line that's indicated there will be a new garden wall. That'll probably be about 6 to 7 feet high, and then the new planting along the edge. So there's a planted buffer also along the edge of the drive, and then there's planting on the western side of the drive as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. Further public comment.
All right, then we have Marion Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. The design has been greatly improved by moving to a single expression instead of multiple expressions, and we appreciate the applicant's changes there. But overall, unfortunately, the design is really not compelling and looks like any suburban apartment block except veneered with good detailing. To resemble Charleston buildings, the concept needs a higher ratio of void to solid, basically larger porches, more depth. We find very problematic the use of wood siding for the exterior of a building of this scale and size. We basically, we feel it's very inappropriate, and we suggest that brick or stucco exterior be considered because it would be more convincing. The Canterbury Neighborhood Association asked the board to defer approval for the development of the conceptual design. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Further public comment.
We'll have Mr. Schwebler.
Okay. Mr. Schwebler.
This is Justin Schwebler with Historic Charleston Foundation. Again, we would like to thank the applicants for continuing to meet with us over the past several weeks and their response to our comments at the last BAR meeting. We feel that they have successfully addressed the concerns of both the BAR and Historic Charleston Foundation from that previous meeting. We feel the single expression design has a strong presence on St. Philip Street, and that they have appropriately activated the entrances to match the rhythm of the residences along St. Philip. We would like to recommend conceptual approval at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Further public comment.
We'll have Ms. Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Again, the Preservation Society would like to express our appreciation to the applicant for reaching out on this project. Like the previous building, we feel the move to a single architectural expression is a major improvement on the previous iteration. Out of the 3 buildings up for review on this site this evening, we feel this building requires the greatest degree of restudy, including the following. First, the building configuration and architectural treatment continue to feel too commercial. In particular, the parapet roof lines do not relate to the restudy and should be restudied with a more residential form. Also, we feel the footprint should be adjusted to allow for more green space and/or porch space. On the note of porches, the small porches surrounding the entries are insufficient and feel suburban in nature and should have a more authentic, substantial dimension or be eliminated. Given the other 3 elevations have a balanced composition, we suggest restudying the St. Philip Street elevation with more symmetry, as well as recessing the center bay of the hyphen for better vertical proportions. As materials are studied, we do feel there's too much wood siding for a building of this scale, and the base level should be expressed in masonry. Based on the degree of restudy needed, we do feel the board should defer the application to allow for further refinement before the project progresses to the next phase of review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minigan. Further public comment? I think that was it.
Any?
Okay. So we will move to city staff comments and recommendations.
Okay. Staff comments will begin with the use of a single expression as an improvement. Number 2, the main porches on St. Philip Street and also in the alley are shallow, which causes the porch elements to appear more as a facade treatment. Recess this portion of the facade another 2 to 3 feet to mitigate the porch depth issue and to improve the massing. And to be clear, this is referring to the porches, not the stoops. Number 3, the mix of hipped roofs with 2 different parapet profiles is fussy. Eliminate the hipped roofs to simplify the overall. Some of the parapets could be downplayed also. At the west elevation, the dominant window pattern is the triple window, the larger center window with satellites. Typically, this would be a feature window, and this elevation could benefit from a simplification to the windows. Simplifying the windows would allow for consistency with the use of shutters and should be studied in conjunction with all facades. Confirm the basic window sizes for scale concerns. And 7, where panels are employed below windows, this should be reflected on the first floor for a good hierarchy to the fenestration pattern. And the recommendation is deferral for roof simplification, slight massing modifications, and tweaking and simplification of overscaled elements with board and staff comments.
Okay, thank you, Tori. The applicant may avail themselves of a 5-minute period to respond, and however you decide to divide that up amongst your applicant representatives is fine, if you choose to use it.
Mr. Brewer will speak.
This is Gary. Again, many of these items would, for us, typically be studied in a preliminary review. We have in the past, once we've gotten approval at Conceptual with comments, we do take those comments to heart and we address them during the preliminary review. Some of these comments are comments that we might study further. The question, I guess, for the board is whether it warrants a deferral for studying of those comments, or if an approval with those comments to preliminary would be justified for study at that point. Rich, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Thank you both. Thank you for that from the applicant. We'll now move to board discussion and potential vote on this agenda item. What do my fellow board members have to say about agenda item number 8?
I'll jump in and quickly say that I agree with staff's assessment of this project and the recommendation. It's important to get it right at this stage, as Ms. Wheeler pointed out in a previous application. And I'll also add that 3 stories with wood siding can be really challenging. And a good case study for that very thing is a little bit down the street at the corner of St. Philip and Wentworth. It's the College of Charleston School of Education. It's wood siding, 3 stories, and it has not weathered well. It's only about 12, 14 years old, and y'all ought to take a look at that to see what happens in our climate. Other than that, I agree with staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. White. Further board comment?
I would like to jump in as well. I think that I agree with all staff comments, obviously, and the single expression, yes, it's improvement, but it's not there yet, actually. And it's not just staff comments, but also the Preservation Society comments, very good ones about, what this facade represents is just facade, and a little bit of the stepping in with the balconies. It doesn't do any good. We don't have a shadow, a proper shadow to separate the solids, and the windows are triple windows are really kind of out of the character altogether. And obviously the last one is wood siding. Yeah, we're getting worse with wood siding, which we will get these days. So I would support the deferral and restudy all the details. Again, the preliminary is to look at the more depths of the details, how they defined, but details right now, what we see is actually refer more and support more of the disconnect of scale and mass here. So I would support the deferral.
Thank you, Luda. Further board comments?
Mr.
Carol,
Chairman. No,
Go ahead.
Carol, no, please.
I don't have much to add to my previous speakers. I'm in agreement with staff comments and with the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Metters.
I would agree with what's already been said also, but also Carol, in the previous application, it made me realize that in this application, back in September, it was denial with board and staff comments and massing. So as part of the review, I want to make sure that we've reviewed everything that was in the 22nd of September review, as well as the staff comments that are with this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Further board comment? Is there a motion?
I'll enter one if y'all are ready. And that would be for deferral in accordance with staff recommendation with board and staff comments.
So Mr. White, your motion was motion for deferral incorporating staff. So say that one more time. I apologize.
Yes, all right. Deferral in accordance with staff recommendation.
Deferral in accordance with staff recommendation and incorporating board and staff comments, correct?
That's correct. That's
Thank
correct.
you for allowing me that two-piece motion, or at least has one added element. Is there a second to Mr. White's motion?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll proceed to call the roll. Mr. Metters, how do you vote on this motion?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Wheeler,
Yay in favor.
Ms. Sobchak,
Yay in favor.
Mr. White.
Yay in favor.
All right, and myself, yay in favor. So that we have a motion for deferral. Okay,
All right. Are we ready?
Ms. Parrish, what's agenda item number 9, 230 St. Philip Street?
At 230 St. Philip Street, this is a request for conceptual approval of a 28-unit apartment building, Courier Square, Phase 2, Building 4, Cannon Borough, Elliott Borough neighborhood, Height District 2.5 to 3, and the Old and Historic District. And you can just go past that. That's the ghost again.
It's okay. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we still have the applicant team on.
Who do we have here this evening for the applicant?
This is Gary Brewer from Robert Stern Architects.
All right, Mr. Brewer, you have the floor.
Okay. Next, please. Next. The site on St. Philip Street. Next, please. In the Cena residential neighborhood, which is predominantly clapboard. Next, please. The site just to the north of it are the 3 single houses. It's 138 feet by 75 feet. Next, please. Here you can see the proposed design at a larger scale. To the south is the Oak Park that was discussed. To the east is the new alley, and with the main facade facing towards St. Philip. Next, please. The floor plans Rich will talk at the end about the request for additional height. Next, please. So the staff comments basically broke down into simplification and studying a single expression rather than a double expression. Next, please. So here you can see the before and after in the context of the neighborhood and the adjacent single houses. Next, please. And the new proposed design and its floor plan in relationship to the adjacent houses. Next, please. And here you can see it at a slightly larger scale. So the previous design had two building components. On the left-hand side were two pavilions connected with a porch, although that porch had been filled in two bays. And then to the right of it was a separate expression that faced towards the Oak Park. What is being proposed is on the bottom with a single expression. Next, please. Here you see it with the plan. It has 4 entries into units off of the ground floor. Next, please. And here you can see it at a larger scale. This has 2 pavilions that are pulled to the center with a continuous porch at the 2nd and 3rd floor that no longer has infilled because the plan has been changed with it. And then on the corners of the building, there are also porches, in our opinion, to help enliven the facade and break down its overall length, but especially on the northern side of the building to help to relate to the scale of the existing house. The proposed materials are wood at the base. We are showing a rusticated treatment with a belt course above it and then clapboard above, much like the 3-story wood precedent that was shown from Charleston in the earlier design. This design at the gables is meant to have classical details and a pediment with a raking crown with a cyma and a corona and a bed mold. And then the 4th floor is set back from the street, so it's not visible. We're also using shutters at the Piano Nobile to punctuate the 2 pavilions. Next, please. And here you can see it at a larger scale, showing the beginning development of the traditional details. Next, please. Here you can see some of the precedents that we have looked at. 16 Montague Street is an example of a 3-story clapboard building, and the old Marine Hospital by Robert Mills, which has the same partie of the end pavilions with a continuous porch in the middle. And next, please. So moving around to the south elevation, the before at the top and the proposed at the bottom. Next, please. Here you can see the proposed facade that faces towards the new Oak Park. Next, please. And in this iteration, it's showing carrying the materials and the colors and the details and the window types to the south facade so that it is treated as a single expression. It has a porch at the main portion of the building, which is 4 stories, and then 3 stories facing towards St. Philip Street. Next, please. Moving around to the east elevation, the previous design and the current proposed design. Next, please. With its plan providing entries at the base or the ground floor of the building. Next, please. And taking in the spirit of simplification, the massing and the detailing of the facade that faces towards St. Philip Street, along with some inset porches. Next, please. I'm sorry, can you go back one? And this is showing between the 3rd and the 4th floor, a major cornice and entablature to help bring down the scale of the building at the side that is 4 stories that is facing the new alley. Next, please. And then finally, the north elevation, the before and the after. Next, please. With the plan and how the 4-story pavilion is treated at this location. Next, please. And again, this is treated as a singular expression with a Cerulean window at the 4-story mass that's on center with double hung windows that balance that facade. Next, please. And the perspective view. Next, please. So the existing view. Next, please. And then the proposed design showing the porches and the changes to a single expression, but also the carving in at the 2nd and 3rd floor to give light and shadow and depth and activity, and to help break down the scale of the building facing towards St. Philip Street. And on the south facade, you can see the new oak park with the large relocated oak tree, primarily buffering the height of the 4th floor. Next, please. And Rich, you want to talk about the zoning envelope?
Yes, so in this zoning envelope, we are requesting an additional floor. But as you can see, with the reduction in the footprint because of the tree and the park and the amount of setback, that there's a significant reduction in the overall mass that the building could be.
So the square footage of the proposed design is actually less than the square footage of if the entire zoning envelope was filled, right, Rich?
Yeah, well said, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So that concludes our presentation.
So because this is a case where we're asking for additional height, we feel like it's important to address the points of merit that show that we're deserving of that. First, by locating the parking on another part of the site, and I can't read that, so I'm not going to try. It affords us the ability to create a better ground floor. The park with the grand tree affords us the opportunity to make a grand front to the building on a park, like many of the buildings, say around Colonial Lake, have names and front doors. We feel like that's an opportunity for very high styling on that park space. We feel that with the deeper balconies and the high quality detailing and materials that we're trying to employ here, that's meritorious. A lot of the Charleston guidelines have been followed. You know, it has sincere attempts at base, middle, top, and verticality. And I think the other thing that goes unsaid, somebody mentioned it, you know, these are multifamily buildings, and yet a lot of the ground floors are treated with a rhythm and cadence so that they have individual entries to better mesh with the neighborhood rhythm and streetscape. And I think that's been artfully done. And then, you know, the overall reduction in building area than what could be built by scope. So we feel like for all those reasons and the open space around the building, that this is a project that is meritorious of half the building for a half a floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gow. We will now move to public comment. Ms. Parrish.
We'll start with Ms. Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Again, the Preservation Society would like to express our appreciation to the applicant for reaching out on this project. Like the previous building, we feel the adjustment to a single architectural expression is a positive move. And out of the 3 buildings up for review this evening, we feel this building is the most improved. Specifically, we appreciate the amount of porch space provided and vertically proportioned masses that relate to existing buildings in the context. However, we do feel bigger moves should be made in the massing at the front facade. Currently, there are only small offsets in the building planes, which causes the facade to appear very flat, as seen in the rendering on page 27. We would suggest increasing the setbacks between the primary gable pavilions, center hyphen, and flanking sections to create more dimension and depth along the front elevation. Also, we would suggest eliminating the stepped parapet roof lines at the front and rear hyphens, which is inconsistent with the character of the building and surrounding vernacular neighborhood. While we are comfortable with the project moving forward, we urge the board to incorporate these comments into the motion and look forward to working with the project team on refining the materials and details. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minigan. Further public comment?
We'll have Mr. Schwebler.
This is Justin Schwebler at the Historic Charleston Foundation. The applicants have made notable improvements to this design. We feel that the architectural direction and the street engagement has substantially improved. We do have concerns over the addition of porches to the north and their impact to the residents of 236 St. Philip Street. We would like to see some sort of horizontal screening on the north side of those porches to maintain their privacy from the new structure. Like the other buildings we've seen this evening, we feel that the singular expression has made for a much stronger overall design, and we would recommend conceptual approval of the designs as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Further public comment, Ms. Parrish?
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Tori. Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, Marion Hawkins with President of Canterbury Elliott Neighborhood Association. We also would like to thank the applicant for working with the neighborhood throughout this whole process for all of Courier Square Phase 2. We also feel the applicant has greatly improved the design of this building by creating a single expression instead of multiple. And we also feel the general massing, scale, and articulation has been greatly improved and is a worthy design. Our only concern, again, is the wood siding in the upper floors for a building of this scale. We would recommend consideration of stucco throughout the whole entire building exterior. We would echo Mr. White's example of the education building on St. Philip's and Wentworth. It has not weathered well for a large building of that scale. But this design is a wonderful improvement. We think it's an excellent design, and is also, because of that, we would support the additional floor or half floor on the fourth level. Also, I would like to take a moment just to thank the board for their deliberate and careful consideration for all these buildings and this project. This project will have a significant impact for the good of Canterbury Elliott Borough neighborhood, and we just like to thank them for their hard work and the time they put into this. With all that in mind, the Neighborhood Association would suggest the board and recommend approval of the concept as well as the additional floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Further public comment?
That concludes the public comment.
All right, we'll move to city staff comment, same recommendations.
I hope my words didn't get jumbled like that page.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. It looked like a corrupted file to me.
Okay, number one, the use of a single expression is an improvement. Number two, the building appears to use a rusticated base of limestone or stucco with joint work, consuming the first floor. However, there's also depicted a brick base at what might be a turned down slab edge, confirmed material at first floor. Number three, provide additional recess to the center portions of the long facades to improve the massing. Four, confirm the basic window sizes for scale concerns. Five, use consistency with shutter application. And the recommendation is deferral for slight massing modifications and resolution of scale concerns with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Tori. The applicant has their 5-minute response period if they would like to use it.
We'd like to thank Historic Charleston, the Preservation Society, and Sienna for working with us in supporting the proposed design. We look forward to board comments, and as always, moving into the next phase, we plan on addressing the comments that come up during this review if the project is approved with those comments. Thank you again to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. We'll now move to our board discussion and a potential vote on agenda item number 9. What do my board members have to say about this presentation?
I'll quickly say that I agree with the perspectives that the preservation community brought to it. And given that, and given the nature of staff comments, I think that this could be set up for an approval. Open to other commentary.
This is Carol Wheeler. I just wanted to get one clarification from the applicant, and it's regarding staff comment number 2. Could you confirm again the material at the first floor? I didn't quite hear what you said when you talked about materials.
Mr. Brewer
Sure.
or Mr. Gow?
Well, what's being proposed is what was on one of the precedent boards, which is a house that I did at Seaside, Florida, where the base of the building is wood, but it's treated as a rusticated scale to give a sort of look of the base of a building rather than carrying clapboard all the way to the ground. So that was what was currently proposed, but is open to discussion about the detailing of it and whether the material would ultimately be wood or not. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Brewer. Further board commentary.
Carol Wheeler, I'll just say a few things. Thanks for the presentation. And since this project requests architectural, an additional half a floor for architectural merit, I guess materials should be commented on already. And I'm not sure if wood is a material that warrants architectural merit, especially again referring to the comments that Mr. White made earlier regarding the maintenance and how it will weather over time. A few other things that were mentioned that would warrant architectural merit, like the porches that are creating shadow lines and an articulation along the St. Philip Street facade. Those were comments that were also mentioned for the previous project. So this is, I wouldn't say that this warrants architectural merit, but that's just something in general that would be expected from a building that gets conceptual approval. For this particular building and the height scalar mass and the half a floor, I wouldn't have a problem with it because it really isn't that visible from the street. So I would be okay with it as long as the materials are of good quality. And we could see that in the next probably preliminary round. Generally, again, for the talking about the architectural merit, I think the site plan is great. The fact that you don't have parking there and the fact that you used a significant amount of space for a public park is a good thing and warrants the architectural merit or the point of the contribution to the public realm.
Thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Further board comments.
This is Lyodan. So I agreed again with all the staff comments, but this particular one has a little bit more cohesive approach to the changes, and the whole building is actually more cohesive and details are less questionable. Nevertheless, a few comments which were coming also from historic foundation and preservation, such as pediment in the front elevation in the central area is not needed, and we need it's south. The porches need to be deeper, and we need to create a little bit more shadow and ins and outs for the facade. The material is very important, obviously, and first study of the wood and this rusticated wood base. I guess we need to see how it's detailed because it's pretty unusual for Charleston, I would say. The additional floor, again, all the points which kind of balance out the adding of that additional floor is, I think is okay. And I would actually, this one is probably could be moved for the approval for the conceptual review.
Thank you, Luda.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Meadows.
So thanks to Gary and Richard for the improvements that have been made on this project. You know, we've been listening for the last between 5, 7, 8, 10 minutes to comments from the board. And then each person ends with, maybe this can move forward to the next level. Maybe it can, but it seems like there are an awful lot of comments being made for this to be approved when we're giving it the additional half floor, which I don't have a problem with either, but we're giving it the additional half floor for architectural merit. So I would like for this to come back again and have the majority of these issues resolved so that we can give them the additional half floor, because I think it should have it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meadows. Further board comments? If none, can I entertain a motion?
Well, I can introduce one, and with one quick preamble, I would introduce a motion for approval, and there's going to be quite a number of board staff comments associated with this, and that would include approval for the additional height. But if it returns at preliminary and these conditions for the additional height are not satisfied, then the project's going to stall out. That's the authority the board has, because there's a lot of circumstances in which we might grant a request for additional height, and then the project returns to at the preliminary stage. Those circumstances aren't fully fleshed out, they've lost their luster, or they're not as powerful as expected. So even if we do approve it tonight with a raft of conditions, we still have the authority to make sure that it retains the quality that it needs. So I'm going to introduce a motion for approval, including the requested additional height, with board and staff comments.
Mr. White, your motion, as I understand it, is a motion for approval, including extra height, incorporating board and staff comments.
That's correct.
Is there a second?
I second.
There's a motion and a second, so I'll therefore proceed to call the roll. Mr. Metters, how do you vote on this item?
Nay, not in favor.
Ms. Wheeler?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
I in favor.
Mr. White?
A in favor.
And myself, yay in favor. Okay.
Thank you for all of your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Gow, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the preliminary on this with a project that incorporates what we've discussed tonight. Thank you to the applicant again for working hard on this project.
Thank you.
Anything further from the board? General comments, anything for the good of the order, anything that staff needs to bring to our attention?
I don't have anything.
I just want to thank Mr. White again for being such an able ad hoc chairman based on his past experience. And again, my apologies, because I did believe I'd be in the meeting earlier. Ms. Wheeler, thank you for being willing to be a substitute this evening on relatively short notice. We thank you for your service and, as always, your excellent and detailed commentary. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Okay?
Great.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Have a good one, everybody.